All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Breaking Absolutes. I am Peter O'Rulian. This is my show that Amazon asked me to do, Twitch asked me to do, um, which I was happy to accommodate as so long as I could sort of do it my way. I'm not really interested in a lot of mugging for the camera. I'm not really interested in a lot of fabulosity around making statements that garner interest because they are disparaging or uh, creating controversy. I'd rather kind of dig deeper into the musicians because I feel like the nature of the genre, metal generally, hard rock, certainly progressive genres of metal, are constituted of musicians that are deserving of a broader audience. I think there's people who go into musicians who go into this field are usually rather accomplished and become increasingly so. And I just, not to be argumentative, but I think there's a lot of popular music that doesn't command the same sort of facility on the instrument. And so my hope is to draw attention to this music and to these people who I think labor in anonymity sometimes. And so today I'm going to talk with Paul Logue. And he'll correct me if I've mispronounced his name. I've done this before. But Paul is the central collaborator with James LaBrie on his new solo record. Paul founded and pretty much writes all the material for Eden's Curse, which is his band. And I was doing some sort of research on Paul, and he's done many things. And I've got some questions for him around that. But this is the avenue through which I became more acquainted with Paul. And so we'll spend some time trying to go over everything that we can as relates to his music career. But before we get into it, I just want to say the album is brand new. It's a different sonic experience than a Dream Theater album with James LaBrie. And that's something I think that should really excite fans. And I'm going to talk more about that. But with that as my setup, let me bring Paul on and we'll get going with our conversation. Paul, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Peter. How are you?
I'm well. Did I butcher your last name?
No, you got it spot on. Yeah.
Okay, good.
I'm just noticing this is the battle of the brick walls. Fake or real, darling? Fake or real?
Mine's fake. Mine's fake.
Well, so is mine. There you go. Yeah.
Just a quick thing on that is it's a total ripoff of Joe Rogan. I was like, oh, I'm going to do a podcast. I don't really have a sound booth per se. I didn't want to do the neon stuff that I see everybody do. So I said, I'll just rip off Joe Rogan. You know, he's got a lot of followers. It can't hurt to emulate the best. But I couldn't afford brick. Like, it would have break the bank. So I found the best, fake I could and threw some pictures up to break up the repeating pattern and called it good.
So it's just like a wallpaper or something, or a frieze.
It's a
Yeah, yeah,
wallpaper.
cool. Same as mine. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I've got it just around the studio and some tour posters. This is my office come studio that I do all my creating in. And I do have a vocal booth. This is what this little thing is in here.
Okay.
I could show you, excuse my shorts and legs, more importantly, but CD cupboard, soundproofed. And I remember Dennis Ward is my, you may know Dennis, he's the bass player extraordinaire, producer. So he's produced Angra, Pink Cream 69 was his main band. And he's always my go-to guy on engineering questions. And I say, Dennis, I've got this killer booth. Any tips for recording my acoustic guitars for Beautiful Shade of Grey in the booth? And he said, don't. So I'd spent all this money on recording and I never even got to do a note of Beautiful Shade of Grey inside of it. And I thought, damn, but he was right to get that, to get a kind of room vibe on the acoustic. So I was using microphones, I was using a DI as well to give it different options for the sound engineer. But that was my story in relation to the booth.
Oh, you're one up on me though, because I don't even have an isolation. I'm in the process. Don't tell anybody, but I just dropped a significant amount of change on some new vocal chain. In fact, I bought the very mic that Dream Theater tracks with James's voice. But I bought some new gear, and then I started researching, and I heard so much about the room, and I don't know how to treat the room. So I've got an engineer buddy who's going to come help me figure it out. So yes, I understand some of the language. I'm not an expert at how I'm going to figure out how to not getting reflections and
Yeah.
stuff here, but vocal isolation booth would be, for me, that would be really pretty cool.
Yeah. And for me, a lot of it comes down to the microphone as well. That's huge. A kind of short story again related to Dennis was for the first two Eden's Curse albums, I went to Germany with the singer of the band at the time, Michael Eden. We recorded in Dennis's studio for both vocals. But because I'd written the songs, I'd written every single melody on it, all of the lyrics, I pretty much guided Michael through everything that he sang, and Dennis hit the buttons and maybe wanted different takes, etc., etc. But when it came to the third album, he said to me, "Dude, you are doing all of this yourself. There's very little that I'm doing. You're a very good engineer because you're coming home, you're doing the rest of the album, you're orchestrating it and producing it with the guys, you're getting the tracks for them, you're doing all of the kind of pre-production elements and sending it, doing any overdub, sending it over to me." He said, "I'll tell you what, I'll send you my microphone when Michael comes, send him to Scotland, throw him into a cupboard, get a nice cupboard, make it dead, put the mic in it, and just do what you do, and I will make it sparkle." And that was the album we did with James, actually, the third album. And this used to be my daughter's room. So she was maybe 2011, she would be about 3 or 4 years old. So that cupboard was basically her clothes cupboard. It was full of like kids' jackets, tracksuits, you name it, hanging up. And we would put a couple of blankets up over some of the units. And eventually my daughter, she's now 15, she says, "Dad, can I move into the front room?" And I said, "Hell yes, I'm taking this and I know what I'm doing with that cupboard." So there we go. That was my journey to having a vocal booth. And then the pandemic hit. So I've had no one in it except for myself.
Well, that's perfect. Well, the pandemic's unfortunate, but the timing works out because now you've got a space and to do the recording.
Yeah. So James, if you're watching, you get your ass over to Scotland, get into the booth.
Get into the booth. That's right. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about you. Your accent sort of is a give. We know you're Scottish. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I'm also a writer. I write fiction as another part of my life, and one of my very, very favorite author persons. Like, he writes great fiction too, but as a personality, is a guy by the name of Jack White. He writes a lot of big epic fiction. He lives in Canada now, but he's from Scotland.
Right. Okay.
And he every time around him, he gets telling me stories about Scottish history that just really give me chills.
Yeah.
And so I was going to ask you, like, are you connected at all to Scotland in that way? It's history, or is that, like, for you, that's, you grew up hearing it, so it doesn't, it's not really something that's in your frontal cortex all the time.
No, I think like most Scots, I'm very patriotic. If you cut my blood or my arm, it's blue blood in there, although technically the team that I support play in green, so that's a kind of a conundrum for me. But yeah, I mean, I love the Scots history as well. I mean, one of my favourite movies is Braveheart, although it's all of the Hollywood schmaltz on top of the actual history and a few plot changes for the sake of ratings. But the essence of the story's still pretty good. And I've dabbled in it for, various projects. I think for the first Eden's Curse album, we did a song called The Fallen King, which just happened to be when I was writing that album. I believe it was something like the 300th anniversary of the death of Robert the Bruce. And I thought, wow, so he was the guy who essentially came after William Wallace finding Scotland its freedom. He was the first king on the throne after Wallace. And I thought, that's an amazing story. And one of the local papers had a 7-page pullout all about his journey to the throne. And one of the real moments that grabbed me was that he had hid off of the shores of Scotland facing to Ireland in caves. And, he was as far away from a king as he would ever have been, living here, foraging out of the forests, eating animals, you name it. This guy was really living to save his life, to stay away. The English were hunting the area, looking for him. and that's what I wrote the song. There was a very famous story about him, which relates to a spider, and the spider kept trying to crawl up this cave and kept falling off. And eventually it made its way after maybe 10 attempts, and Bruce came out with a mantra: if at first you don't succeed, try and try again. And that was one of the drivers or inspiration or folklores that's going around about him. And I wrote that song based upon that here was the fallen king, the guy who could be king or would be king, and his journey of evolution on finding his way and all of the hardship to get to that. So I've dabbled with a couple of friends. We've talked about it for years, of maybe doing a concept album around that whole historical piece. We even had Doogie White on our album, the singer from Rainbow and Malmsteen, etc. He did the voice. We did this look deep in your heart, Robert, that kind of voice on it. And Doogie's a great friend of mine because he's got a wonderful timbre about him, not just a killer singer, but an amazing vocal timbre. And we've talked about doing all of these kind of roles, and even my friend Steve Grimmett from Grim Reaper, he would have played the role of a king, an English king. So that's maybe something we will explore and do one of these days, but it's a huge undertaking to do that, and it would just be having the right time to do it. But I love the history, to cut a long story short. I do love it. There are many tales, as you've said, that just blow your mind, and such a long history. If I get a chance to have friends over here, one of the first things that I do, if they're from America or Europe, I take them to Stirling Castle, which isn't too far from me. And it's just an unbelievable castle, but they've not renovated too much of it. It's still standing in its natural order, but they've set up the kind of kitchens the way it probably was during ancient times. They've got smells in there, some stinking smells, shall we say, to represent what all of these rooms would have done. And they have all of these waxwork dummies and modes of working or doing various things around the castle, and it blows your mind when you first see it. It's a really, really cool thing. So Scotland's awesome. As much as I complain about the terrible weather we have just an unbelievable landscape and history, and everything else, is by the by. We don't have great sports teams, but hey, that's not the be all and end all.
I'm a huge fan. I can't pretend to know it in depth, but as a writer, I wrote an entire historical novel based on Robert Louis Stevenson.
Okay, cool.
So I did a bunch of research about Scotland and about him and his family, and I just got kind of pulled in every time I'm with this writer friend of mine. He relates to me. I think one that he loves to tell me is the Battle of Bannockburn. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
And like you, I'm a huge fan of Braveheart. I always know that Hollywood takes liberties, but that moment, I think it's Robert the Bruce that portrays Wallace, right?
That's right.
That moment of cinema is so deeply moving.
Totally. There's no words actually spoken. It's the look between each of them. And that's one of the places, again, my wife's family are from almost at Bannockburn. They're literally 10 miles from Bannockburn. And I don't even know if it's on the web or anything, but maybe the first Eden's Curse album we did, just to promote the record, it was selling quite well. We did a kind of DVD, the making of, because we filmed a lot of the sessions, and we each asked all of the guys to do something, kind of cool. So Michael, he's a Illinois guy, so he went to one of his famous stores, the Alley in Chicago, so Killer Rock store for clothing. One of the guys, Ferdy, he plays slide guitar, so he was doing things like that. And I went to Bannockburn and Stirling Castle for my piece, and standing on that battlefield gives you the chills, man. I mean, it's just a plain grass field, but when you know the history of what happened here, and under this soil must be the remains of, literally thousands of English and Scottish soldiers from hundreds of years back, it actually gives you the chills. The wind catches you the wrong way, and it's like, okay, it's time to go. I wouldn't go up there in the evening, put it that way. But a funny story as well with Scotland and England still having a little bit of rivalry, mainly in sport more so than anything. The two teams were drawn, I I think it was last year in the European Championships at soccer, and 5 guys in the pub one night. They were getting the bus the next morning down to London. So Scotland were playing England in England, like the days of old when they used to march on England. And these 4 guys decided they were going to go to Bannockburn, climb up the 30-foot monument and steal the blue and white flag off the top of the Bannockburn monument and take it to the soccer game in England. And they did. And they left a note up there saying they would return it, and they did return it. They brought it back. Yeah. Yeah, so there's lots of cool stories. One that you must look if you haven't heard about it yet. You probably have. You're an educated guy. Have you heard the story of the Destiny Stone?
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. There is a movie out there about it.
I haven't seen the movie, but for the people who are, I know we're on a sidetrack here, but this is the kind of stuff that I think I like to do because I think it personalizes the musicians. For the folks that are watching now and that will watch this later, give us the thumbnail story of it. So I can't quite remember what the stone's origin was, but I believe it was a stone within somewhere in Scotland, a very important stone within Scotland. Maybe it was part of a throne or some. I can't quite remember. My memory's a bit sketchy, but the story was it ended up in England, and it ended up in a seat within one of the key houses around the Parliament. And the guy actually in the movie is the guy who played Daredevil. I can't remember that chap's name. The Marvel. Affleck?
Yeah, no, the new Daredevil was on Netflix. The three kind of series. Yeah, that's killer. You should check that out too. So the lead character is the guy in the movie, and I think the story was maybe in the 50s that these Scottish patriots decided they were going to go to London and break into this part of it would be some kind of abbey it was in, and it was actually encased into a wooden chair, and they'd hatched this plan to get the stone, crack the chair, all in the middle of the night. They'd been scouring the place, making sure the security guard noting what time he was there, all in the 50s, remember, the 1950s. And they went down and they actually stole it and got it under a jacket and into a car, and they weren't found for years later. And I think they were round about the Bannockburn area as well. They were back up in Scotland. So it's definitely worth reading. There's a book out about it or a film, but it's a killer story. Even Jim Petrick wrote an album about it. He wrote a song with Pride of Lions, his band, about Destiny Stone.
Wow. Yeah, there you go. The history is so rich there. I'm currently writing another novel that's set in London, so it's not Scotland. But as I'm doing the research, I just realize Europe in general, there's the history goes back so far. You know, we're such a young country; we just don't have that, at least not in the same way. So I love European history, and I in particular someday I will get to Scotland. I need to. I want to see the Highkirk because I set scenes there. You do. There's a big festival there every year, isn't there, with music and arts?
Yeah, there's lots. Yeah, probably the most famous one would be Edinburgh Festival. Is on all with comedians, artists, singers, poets, you name it. Yeah. That's probably the most famous. But I was actually going to say that you and I have both got what I would consider Irish surnames.
Oh, interestingly, mine is not. Mine is. It's often mistaken, but it's actually Armenian.
Armenian, okay, so they have O's as well, right?
Yeah,
wow.
It's O'Rourke. It was a town, and so
right.
I think literally it translates as I'm from this town.
Got you.
But I have part of the first part of my family that first came here that wound up in California. Decided, as many immigrants do, because they wanted to fit in some different way, they started to use the apostrophe to sort of signal that, just because they didn't know if Armenians would be quite as well received.
yeah, I get it. I've heard a few, and maybe change the second part to O'Reilly.
Yeah, kind of and pronounce it a little.
Yeah, that's true. But even my name to this day, I can't pronounce my name without then spelling it because no one can say it. Or I had a friend whose father was a genuine Irishman, and he used to say to me, "That name of yours, it sounds like a fucking disease." I've got a bad case of the logue.
Yeah, well, he kind of has a point.
yeah.
Oh, Well, okay, let's start digging in a little bit to, well, there's a few more questions I want to ask you. So, your background, you list that you were, before, I guess, becoming principally a musician, you did some IT work. I was at Microsoft for a while, so I was interested to
Hmm.
know what you did in IT before you abandoned
Yeah,
for.
I still do IT actually. I've never
Okay.
abandoned my career. So I worked for IBM for 21 years. So various different roles. When I joined the company in 1998, we were still making PCs. We were still making laptops, servers, you name it. My first job actually was managing accounts for big high street stores. So they were ordering huge volumes of IBM kit. And then later on, I moved into software development, software management, and now I'm a software consultant. So I have left IBM. I've gone to a company based in Beverly Hills actually, and I work solely from home. But we sell travel and expense management software. So if you're traveling on behalf of your work to go to some location, you're taking photographs with your receipt using our app, and it all comes through and
Okay.
reimburses you back your money. So yeah, it's a cool job, and it's given me, a nice life, and probably, the opportunity to do things with our bands.
Yeah. Yeah. It's unfortunate that talented musicians are often sort of, it's a necessity to supplement your income, because
Mm.
music doesn't always fully support. But it's cool that you have those kinds of skills. Because if you get in the right part of IT, the pay can be pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And in fact, my income has always been IT. It's never been through music. If I make money off of music, I have enough money to buy my wife a nice meal in the night. That is just the standard of, the genre that I'm in, the size
Yeah,
of label, the size of band, and Eden's Curse did kind of break up a couple of years because the scene wasn't the best for touring, and we do have an international band, which doesn't help, but it suits my life, to be perfectly honest. I think I'm well beyond having five guys knocking my door every Friday night. What are we doing tonight? What are we writing? What are we playing?
yeah,
I did that when I was a young man, and it was the right time at the right moment in my life.
yeah, yeah. I think you're right. Although I'm one of these guys that when I hear Gene Simmons declare that rock is dead, and um, when I see the radio waves, at least in America, being almost entirely dominated by music that I find somewhat vacuous. Um, uh, it's like I want to wave this banner for this music,
Yeah.
and I'm constantly thinking of ways to try and reintroduce it to new people. And we can talk some more about that later, because I think I have ideas about how to repopularize guitar-driven music,
Mm,
guitar-centered music. But I'm an optimist, so
interesting.
I might be
Interesting.
drinking my own Kool-Aid there. Um, so let's talk just a little bit about Eden's Curse then. If I sort of understood and gleaned correctly, you're kind of the linchpin there. You do the songwriting. You've managed the band. Is this
Yeah.
that kind of right? I heard you say before, in some of the song compositional approach, you have this idea of you kind of give a sketch and then the players come in and sort of paint it up.
Mm.
So are you doing most of the seminal songwriting, and then the players kind of come in and put their stamp on it? Is that how it works?
Yeah, yeah, certainly. I mean, I don't think there's any secret that it really started as a project for me because I was actually writing for some other artists. So I had a band in Scotland called Cry Havoc. We did one album, the whole story of make an album, get signed, label drops you before the albums come out. You have to get the album back. Some crappy label in America releases it, and this was maybe a 10-year period that went on like that. Not playing any real notable gigs, but all the time writing my own material, trying to perfect my craft. And I tried to think how this happened, but it's so far so far back I have to try and guess. But I remember bumping into David Reedman from Pink Cream 69. If you don't know him as a singer, he is an incredible vocalist. And he was an English guy that replaced Andy Deris. When Andy Deris left Pink Cream 69 to join Helloween,
Mm.
David Reedman got the gig, and he was from a town not so far away from me, maybe 3 hours away from me in Lancashire. Amazing, amazing voice, unique sound of his own, really. And I think through IT and being a fan of the genre and music, I bumped into several people and offered to build David a website. One thing led to another. He started asking, "Yeah, do you play yourself?" I let him hear some of my songs, and he's like, "But this is really, really good." He said, "I'm doing a solo album. Would you be interested in playing some bass?" I says, "I'll play the bass on the entire album," and it was going to be produced by Dennis Ward. And in actual fact, David started asking me, "You know that song that you let me hear a couple of weeks ago? Would you mind if I had it for my record?" I'm like, "It's sitting there doing nothing. It's not going anywhere. I don't have anybody interested in this material. My own band's just filtered out." And he took one, and then he took two, and the next thing he's got 6 or 7 songs on the album. So that was awesome. The lead single, which he released for that album, was called "Don't Let It Slip Away," was a song I wrote for my wife, which was just amazing to hear another man sing it. Sounds a bit weird, but it was a pivotal moment for me. And that started to introduce me to Dennis, and Dennis and David were huge advocates of me, what I did, and just the way that I worked. You know, I think anybody that works with me in music will hopefully say that I'm a fair guy. I love to give people, as I said earlier, their license to put their stamp on it. When I do write a song, Peter, I will give you it in a full demo form. So it's got guitars, it's got vocals, it's got backup vocals, it's got drums on it. But I say to the guys, look, that's what I'm thinking here. Give me your own, what would you do naturally? So I'll give them a karaoke mix minus their instrument and allow them to really to go to town. And there's very few times I have to come back and say, no, I really need that. That's what I'm hearing. That's very rare for me to do that, because I think someone always adds their own element to it. And if it makes the song better, I'm all for it as well. I love writing with other people. So I was never a guy, even in Eden's Curse, I pretty much wrote, I would say 90% of the debut album. And I worked with a co-writer called Carsten Schulz from Germany, who sang with a band called Evidence One. And he wrote a lot of lyrics where I was just inundated with song ideas for that album that I would say, look, here's 3 that I hadn't even looked at yet vocally or for melodies. And he came back, and every submission he gave me was amazing, that I thought, wow, this is a no-brainer to continue to write with Carsten. And then our drummer, he was a fantastic musician, amazing backing vocalist. I've never heard a guy layer harmonies like Pete Newdeck, his name is, incredible musician. And he didn't really start writing until the second album, but boy, when he wrote, his choruses were just unbelievable. Some of the best choruses I've ever heard in my life. And I would write a song up to the chorus, leave it blank, and say, Pete, do your magic. And always it came back just sensational. So I've developed those writing patterns. But writing with other people at David and getting a lot of work with Dennis Ward, Dennis just said to me, look, why are you not in a band? You're a good musician. When I'm looking for songs, he would say, I need 3 in this style. I would send them over, and he would then start asking me, do you have these on tap? Are they in files in your hard drive? And I said, no, I wrote them all from scratch. You literally wrote these all from scratch? I said, yeah, well, you've told me what you're looking for, so I would rather give you what you're looking for. And he's just like, Paul, you need to be doing something. Just go and find a band. And being an IT guy, what really turned the light on in my head was when David and I started working. He said to me, could you mute the song that you're mixing there at home, mute your vocals, and give me it with the complete instrumentation, karaoke mix as we call it. And he then sent me the song back with his voice on top of it. And I thought, wow, listen to that. It actually made all of the hairs in my neck and my arms stand up, which for me is one of the key things as a writer. If it excites you in the demo form, what's it going to be like? I've got that vision to get really excited about then adding all of the color to the palette. And I thought I could do this on a grand size if I could find the right people. And that took me maybe 6 months to do that. So Eden's Curse to me started with an advert on melodicrock.com's message board. And even got Andrew McNeese. I'm not sure if you know the website, but Andrew, who runs it's a good friend of mine, and he's from Tasmania. I said, look, would you post an advert on the news page? And it was, looking for songwriter looking for to start a kind of melodic rock band in the vein of TNT, Winger, Edguy, Dream Theater, Journey. I just threw in a melting pot of influences, Queensryche, Dokken. These were all just what I loved. I wanted that marriage of US hard rock, European hard rock, and being a guy who'd been married at that point for 15 years, I like kind of thinking's man metal. That's why I connect with the likes of Camelot. I love Dream Theater, Queensryche, lyrics that are not just met this girl at the bar and took her home. Boring. Let's say something. Let's provoke a few thoughts. And I had a very defined thought in my head about what I wanted to do. And it was just finding the musicians. And that took ages, sifting through multiple edition MP3s, some hilarious ones, some absolutely amazing ones. And then saying, the thing for me was, do I have to change this person to fit into what I wanted? And when I said no, that was the guy that we would go with.
That's a really smart lens through which to look.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
Yeah, and I think it only works when you've got a huge volume. So for the guitar editions, we had roughly 50 MP3s coming in from players, and love this guy, but he looks terrible. Not that I looked any different at the time, but you're trying to picture you, especially if you've got a vision. You're a creator, you're an artist, you know what it's like. You envisage the way a book's going to start and what's the middle going to be like, how's it going to be end. You envisage what the cover's going to look like. That's your whole creation starting and forming in your mind's eye. And even the individuals in the band were critical to what I wanted to have as well. I met the singer through that forum as well. And we were kindred spirits really from the get-go, that he was the perfect foil for me. And we bounced ideas and kind of songs off each other. But I did all of the writing. He would maybe just do a couple of changes. But a lot of that the magic would come when we got into the studio to record the finals. And then that band was put together 6 months later. We did the whole album probably within a year. And to be honest, we got signed immediately. It was such a high level. Dennis Ward said to me, unbelievable. He said, look, I'll mix the record. If you get signed, you owe me the money. If you don't, hey, it's my loss. And I'm like, can I still keep the CD of your mixes? He's like, of course you can. You're my friend. Just go and get signed. And we got signed straight away. And a funny story was when we got our deal, we got a better deal on the second album and a longer term contract with AFM Records in Germany. We've been with them to this day. We've still got a contract there. And when we got the second album, I went back to Germany to record the vocals. And because Dennis had given me such a cool break, I came to his house with basically an envelope full of euros, thousands of euros, and paid him the entire mix up front before he'd even started recording the vocals.
Oh, wow.
And it totally went the opposite way. He was like, what the fuck am I going to do with this? My accountant will go crazy. So it actually didn't work in my favor at all. But it was my way of saying, look, you took a chance on me. I trust you completely. Here's the money. No questions asked. Of course, it was coming out of the budget. It wasn't selling drugs or anything, but it was just to say thank you to him for sticking his neck on the line for us. And the record went straight into the charts in Japan, and the label were saying, "Can you write a second one quickly?" So that was an amazing time period. But that's how I got started, really.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And there's a lot to for folk. I think a lot of the people who watch the channel are musicians. So I think there's a lot of value in that story that you just shared. Not the least of which is the where I paused you for a moment on your process for sort of creating the chemistry. Because I say this all the time. There's the countless players, but getting people together that can have some sort of chemistry and then write songs. That's successive levels of challenge. By the time you get to you've written a song people like, there's so many layers of success that have had to happen in finding people, personalities, being able to write together. I can appreciate that that journey. I wrote a holiday rock opera, and I was looking for vocalists because I wanted to piece the different songs from different character point of views. And there are online places where you can go and you can find vocalists, and they have demo reels. And I went on a couple of these websites, and there must be tens of thousands of vocalists. And I'm maybe a little OCD in this, but I had to listen to them all, and so it took forever. And the preponderance of them were kind of in the vein of Ariana Grande, sort of the new R&B. But I was looking for a big voice that could and a certain tonal quality when they hit certain notes, because I knew the where I had written the melodies. So I can appreciate what you're talking about, where you're trying to fit a look and an attitude and a musician into a project that is not it's not just, I can play really fast arpeggio, so put me in. And you can't, the universe of musicians is lousy with guitar players. There's there's just so many, and so many good ones. But the fit's everything. And I did go and listen to a bunch of Eden's Curse, and I'm really happy that I've kind of discovered it through this process, because the music's really good. And it is one of the questions I wanted to ask you. What is next for Eden's Curse? What should we be anticipating?
I think the answer is I don't know. I mean, we did kind of get back a couple of years ago. We haven't done anything since because, I fell straight into this project with James. And I have to say that I'm still in this project with James. We're working on launch of merchandise, his website. We're talking about touring. So for me to then pivot over, given the fact I've just told you I've got a full-time IT career as well as a family, that's extremely difficult for me to devote, two hugely time-consuming elements, and I don't want to take time away from the James project, because it's in a really good place right now, and it's exciting to be thinking about, are we taking this on the road? And we have some concrete offers that we're exploring and seeing, can we make this work? So that's going to be a while, I think, before I get a chance to get to Eden's Curse. I may never get to it. I don't know. I have to feel right about it. But I have written songs for the next album. I've got several ideas down there, but I don't think an Eden's Curse record is going to come, within the next at least a year before I even get really a chance to sit down and start it. Because to be honest, I think James and I are already swapping ideas for album number 2. It's likely with a second follow-up to Beautiful Shade of Grey before an Eden's Curse record, but I never say never, put it that way. It's my baby and my love, and I will return, but I've given 15 years of my life to it, and ended up having to stop because things weren't going in the trajectory that we wanted it to. My door has never been knocked once by anyone other than the lovely people at our record label, but no promoters knocked my door, barely any of the band have knocked the door, so it's, the world isn't dying for a new Eden's Curse record.
Yeah, it's a good creative awareness to have. Sometimes I know this even personally. You feel some creators can feel a sense of obligation to something they've begun, with blinders as to whether or not there's a waiting audience for it. And maybe the creative process is still meaningful for its own sake, but when you've got other creative things you're doing that are commanding your time, that maybe are gratifying you, then I think it's responsible and understandable to put energy there. You answered the question that I was going to ask about touring. It sounds like it's not chiseled in stone, but that's something that might happen with this record, which is exciting.
I mean, obviously everyone's aware that James is extremely busy. DT have got an unbelievably busy schedule, but yeah, we all have stuff. I've talked about my career. I am a director in the company. I'm at a very responsible position, so I just can't get up and leave for months on end. So we're trying to. And James and I are just 2 parts of the equation. There's 5 elements: Chance, Christian, Marco, that we need to make sure, do we have a time period for everyone? is the money there from promoters to bring this? Because we are going to face the same challenges that I faced, probably even worse now with Brexit for us lovely Brits that were forced out of our European Union against our will, us Scottish guys.
Yeah.
But that's made life difficult for us to tour now. There's also the elements of availability, money, blah blah blah, all of the transatlantic flights. We will do everything in our power to try and make this work. As we said, we've got an offer for the kind of German territory to begin with, but can we do a short tour of that region to begin with? I have no idea. What are we going to do? Will we have that dilemma? Do we play the entire album in full? Do we do 5 songs? Do we do some acoustic DT stuff, some James's solo? So there's lots of exciting things. That's why my free time is so limited at the moment. That's why I'm putting it where the iron is hot, essentially, because it's exciting. It reminds me of the time when Eden's Curse first broke. Things were happening. The record label were having you talking to great guys like yourselves. You were doing interviews. You were doing videos with the talented people like Wayne Joyner. It was just in a
Wayne's the man.
There's a circle. In fact, I meant to ask, is your intro a Wayne?
No. Actually, the intro is from a very talented guy by the name of Roy, blanking his last name, in Brazil. But Wayne has done multiple videos for me from that holiday rock opera I told you about.
Okay.
Yeah, he's and he and I are pretty good friends. We met through the DT connection. But
yep.
And the videos he's done for this Beautiful Shade of Grey have been amazing.
Oh, thank you. In fact, I think I watched you interviewing him on here as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Not so long back.
Yeah, he's a beautiful soul, actually, Wayne. He's one of the nicest guys I've met in the music business, and he's just a charm to actually talk to, and keeps in touch through WhatsApp all of the time. Always sends little messages. Great to see things doing so well. So, things are in a good place. We'll see what happens with Eden's Curse. So I'm sure I'll get back to it at some point, but yeah, I'm going to try and see how far we can go with James.
Well, I want to make a plug for how I would see this concert go. And I know that the DT guys do things when DT's not on the road, because as a matter of fact, later tonight, as it just happens, Jordan Rudess is starting his own sort of solo tour here in Seattle. So I get to see Jordan later tonight in concert. And I've seen him do this before. It's him and the piano, and then he brings up some of his electronic gear, and he's just always so amazing. And I know the other guys do it. And I hope that you guys find the opportunity to fit in some short runs with this. And what I would love to see, it's true that you're going to have some Eden's Curse fans out there who are going to want to show up. Obviously, there's going to be some Dream Theater fans that are going to show up, and everybody always wants to hear the thing that they first noted the musician for. But this album has more so than a lot of records, and some of it, I want to ask you about this deliberately, but and it could have, part of it I think is an artifact of the instrumentation you chose, how the orchestration played out, and I have some questions about that. Lyrically, how it's put together, and not the least of which is just your compositional sensibility. But all these things together create the record coheres. The record has a feeling to it. And if I was coming to see this show, I would want you to play this record front to back. I want to have the experience of this music. And then do an encore, and you do the 1 or 2 songs that everybody knows James from. There are echoes in here, where you can hear James from soft, narratively gilded sections of things like A Change of Seasons, and these echoes are wonderful for DT fans. But it's uniquely its own, and I think the experience would be lovely to have to hear all of this record, and not have it be like cherry picked with a couple of tracks and then force fit with other things that from the expectations of a Dream Theater fan. Now, I might be unique in my view there, but as I was experiencing this record, I listened to it kind of linearly several times, and I was so impressed that it has its own sonic signature. It's unique. There's this expectation that I think a lot of Dream Theater fans have of the players who they go do their solo stuff that, oh, cool, we're going to get another sort of DT thing.
Yeah.
And when I talked to Jordan, I had him on the show. The record I liked best of his was this thing that was just this beautiful piano tunes that were, I was just so amazed. And it wasn't because he was playing like arpeggios like crazy. The compositions were just so amazing. And and that record matters a lot to him, but I think a lot of his fans don't discover it. And I think that what James has done here in partnership with you, and there were others I know, but you as the central songwriter, has created is showing a side of him that the fans, I think, don't really know so well. And maybe this is new for him. I know he's excited about it. And I think you guys, I think you're onto something. That's my long sort of blathering. I think you're really onto something here. I think it's unique. I think it finds itself amidst a lot of other music at a time when there's something needful about how it sounds and the kinds of message it's conveying. So that's my framework for our conversation. And I hope, you can always cross your fingers that if you guys do a tour, you'll come to Seattle, because that's where I live.
Yeah, well, we'll certainly keep that in mind. But thanks for the kind words, Peter. And yeah, it's lovely to hear. We've been overwhelmed by the positive reaction. We're all long and ugly enough in this game to know that you can't please everyone. Yeah. But the reaction has been sensational, way beyond our wildest dreams. And I think because it is such a departure, there were moments throughout the recording where James would say to me, are we doing the right thing here? And I said, does it feel good? Does it sound good? And he's like, hell yeah. But when we started, it was truly just the two of us on acoustic guitar. And I was saying to somebody during press that I'm not sure that some of these songs would translate if James and I, for example, walked into a radio station. But to be honest, I play them a lot I pick my guitar up and I'm looking here, I riff away, and the next thing it's Devil and Drag. And I'm thinking, actually, this would translate. But they were all created in that manner, first and foremost. We then started adding in Christian Pilgrim, we started adding in chants. So they've got that ability to transcend to, from what James and I affectionately called the campfire to that full band ensemble. And I think that the classic rock push wasn't something we had to try too hard, because it's deep inside of me anyway. And James said, look, I love your style of writing because it reminds me, it takes me back to the halcyon days of, the bands that I grew up listening to. And that naturally comes out of me, people like Whitesnake and Maiden and Purple and Rainbow. It's just in there within all of the kind of European power metal things that I've got, and melodic metal, all of that. So I just naturally wrote songs the way that I always write them. I come up with a riff, I throw him the riff, and he says, wow, that's great, right, go and finish the rest of it. And that's pretty much what we did. What was really interesting for me from a songwriting perspective was at no time did we ever talk about keys or anything like that. What range should it be in? What key should it be in? How should we start it? I just wrote and naturally gave it to James, and he put a melody on it. So for him, writing those melodies, people have said things about the melodies are different from the way that DT does it. He still wrote melodies to a piece of music. It wasn't anything other than that. There were the odd song that he would throw me. What I Missed, for example, would be a perfect example. I'd wake up in the morning with the time difference between us about 5 or 6 hours. I would have an iPhone message from James, and he would literally be humming a melody down the telephone. And he would say, I'm thinking of this, do, 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 do. And I would come up here, grab the guitar, try and come up with something. And I would try and always keep it roughly in the key that he was doing, especially if he was singing. So one day I woke up, one of the messages was, dude, this has just come to me. And he sang, let's just run away. So he did the whole chorus for Supernova Girl, the lyrics, everything. And I thought, that's sensational. And I just pitched that to exactly what he was singing, because I thought that naturally is coming out of him. So I'm going to try and find that key. And I did get the key, and then I said to James, hang on, I've got an idea here. We were talking about Led Zeppelin 3 and the style that they had, marrying the acoustic guitar in. And I was playing around with some open tuning. I think I was actually learning during the pandemic. I thought, hell, I'm going to learn some famous songs that I've always wanted to play on guitar. And like you, there was some guy on YouTube that had his own channel that taught you, and one of them was the Black Crowes, She Talks to Angels. So I learned all the guitar. So my guitar was sitting in open tuning, and I thought, wonder if I could write it in open tuning. And I'd already written Wildflower in open E tuning as well. And it was just a case of finding those chords to start that song. So there was no, there was no magic. There was no fairy dust. It was just me being me and James being James. I have to say, though, working with him so closely, we've been, like yourself, friends for many years since we started working with Eden's Curse, but we've never been as tight and as close as we are now. We've met each other on countless occasions, but I think we really truly became best buddies over this period of time, getting to know each other. He's so fair. I'm really a fair guy as well, and James was over the top in making sure that I was happy about all the decisions that were being made, and totally was. I was old enough and ugly enough to say, I don't like that, and he would take it. He's no problem. I'm sure you know that about him. He's a stand-up guy, and that made it so easy to write this record with him, because we could be honest with each other. There were times where Devil in Drag's a great example, because it's on an acoustic guitar on a single riff. I don't even know if you could hear this through the microphone. You probably can't, but let's just play it, see if it comes through.
Yeah.
Is that coming through?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Yeah. So when you're writing a song like that on acoustic, just the two of us, I send that to James and he says, great riff, but I don't know how that's going to translate. And I'm saying, look, you have to think of bass, drums, 36 of these motherfuckers on top of it. That's going to sound amazing. Yeah. And we'd no idea the elements that Christian would add with the Hammond, because, that wasn't in my mind's eye. It was, Chris, what do you want to do to this? And in comes these massive kind of John Lord Hammonds and the Keith Emerson licks as well, which just took it to another level. So sometimes you were having to speak to each other and say, look, this is where I'm going with this one. It'll be fine once we get to the recording, because you are literally recording one or two of these tracks on a demo form. You don't want to sit there and record 34 acoustic guitars in a demo for your buddy to say, nah, this is not doing it for me. You're trying to maximize your output and your time as well. So it was so easy to work and write with him, and that kind of collaborative process really helped take us where we were. And I think a key element was we were really in tune with what each other was thinking. I think we both came to the table and said, we were writing Sunset Ruin, and it's got these gorgeous finger picking things. James came out with this incredible melody, which is a funny story. I'll tell you about melodies in a second. So he sings the melodies as opposed to the words. So you get a demo back going, na, 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 na. But they are amazing melodies. When you hear them in that form, you're thinking, oh God, this is sensational. Can't wait to hear it with lyrics. And he does that for the entire song. So you've no idea what the song's going to be called. You've no idea what the words are going to be, but the hooks are all there. You can hear in a melody and I've never met anybody that does that. And it was amazing, because I would be walking about the house making, lunch for the family, and I would be singing this what turned out to be Am I Right? And the way that James sung it was like, ba-da, 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 ba. So I'd be literally walking around the house singing that. And that was amazing to get involved with that. And it really helped us produce the final element and be so open and honest with each other. It was great.
Yeah, it's you've anticipated one of the questions I was going to ask. Sort of the genesis of it, because it sounds like you talked about it and you finally decided to do it, but a lot of, at least what I'm hearing, is that how the songwriting, I think, matured and I think became successful was this trusting friendship that you that evolved or matured even that much more during the writing process. Because I know with Dream Theater, I think quite a bit of the melody and lyrics stuff, sometimes James writes lyrics, but a lot of it's done by different members of the group, and then James interprets it, and I think he introduces changes, but I think very often core melody lines and lyrics are come from other players. So this is so when if someone hears this and thinks, oh, sounds different, or they might be hearing just a little bit more, something more centrally James in terms of melodic sensibility. And I want to talk about "Am I Right?" It's my favorite track, but I don't want to get.
Oh, thank you.
I don't want to get to that yet because there's so much I want to say about it. So I want to build up to that part of the conversation. I want folks to know if they haven't seen, and there may be more than this, and so you can add on, Paul, if I missed some. But the record landed at number 11 at the UK on the UK rock album charts. It entered at number 55 in the German charts. It was added to the Spotify prog rock playlist at the top. Am I Right? Which is I think, at least for me, it's my favorite song on the record. So for this new enterprise that you guys have begun, you're getting some industry recognition kind of out of the gate, and I think that's it's deserved, and I think that's why this can snowball into something that we could see live, and that we should hopefully see more records from, because I think you guys. I think you found a really unique chemistry, and it's not that you couldn't write records with that are more fully realized as the full electric versions, like you have a song that but there's something that's so I don't want to say understated, but being able to relax into a song that's just beautiful, because one of the things that I was reacquainted with by listening to this record is the percussive nature of the acoustic guitar. As you're playing rhythms and there's through an electric guitar, it doesn't sound like it's a rhythm instrument, but it doesn't sound percussive. I know that sounds it's a strange delineation, but the acoustic guitar has this this ability to be melodic and also to impart this sort of percussive sensibility, and so much of it just felt organic. I'm searching for the word. It's not world music, but it felt like more grounded, and there was a beauty in that. And there were places where Chance was doing things with percussive things that wasn't just big kit stuff, and the choices that Chris would make, where he'd have a retro organ, or and it wasn't like these crazy runs. It was finding the place for the instruments inside the composition, and then just letting it be beautiful. And because it's mostly acoustic, even though layered and rich and full, I don't know. It was just a sonic experience that took me by surprise. And once I started listening to it, it felt like it was addressing a need I didn't know I had.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And all of that, thank you for saying everything that you said there, Peter. It's been very deliberate. There was definitely, without doubt, the first thing James said when we bumped into each other at the airport, I'm sure people have heard that story, that we had lost touch after a while, and I was actually going to a work gig in London. He was coming off the DT tour in my hometown, which I was at the show the night before, and we met each other in a coffee shop in the airport. And that kick-started the whole reacquaintance, and he actually asked me outright there and then, I want to do a laid-back kind of acoustic album. I think you're the guy that would be there to write it with me. I said, I bloody well would. Let's do it. Deal done. And, so there from the outset, we knew what it was going to be. I went home energized, started thinking, right, God, going to be writing with James for the first time, something I would always have loved to done. We talked about it for years, but here's a chance to actually do it. and believe it or not, had one or two ideas on file already because we'd spoke a few years back. I listened to them, thought, nah, okay, they're all kind of electric based, and just picked up the acoustic guitar because of obviously what he said, and started throwing down some ideas. And then I think James went skiing with his wife for a couple of weeks. We connected. The pandemic hit as well, and that gave us the perfect time to do this. And that's what we said, let's get to it. And he just re-emphasized that classic rock style of mine that he liked. He talked about Zeppelin 3, how they worked with acoustic guitars. And I just threw that CD in the car and kept it on shuffle as we were driving around doing shopping, etc. Just reacquainting with some of the old classics and just different angles. It's great to listen as a fan, of course, but when you're now coming at it from a creative aspect, just maybe as you read some books from writers that you love to get inspiration, I'm thinking, okay, where were they going there? What kind of tunings were they using? And then we started to manifest the first few ideas together. So that was deliberate. James was meticulous on, who plays where on the songs, etc. Don't overstate. Chance, I can't say enough about Chance, who came in initially as a drummer and left as the third amigo. He became at one point I called James and says, look, he has been so involved in the production and the arrangements, it would be totally unfair of you and I not to give him a co-producer's credit. So we did, because he would say, look, dinosaurs, old guys, pay attention. Let's do some percussion instead of the 80s rock ballad kit here. Yeah. Let's do, let's go to, I can't even remember, is that a cajon? Is that what you call it? That sit on the drum on I Am Right, which is just gorgeous sounding. The recording he got of that was incredible. Shakers, just perfectly placed. Chris was working really hard at producing these unbelievable soundscapes. But James would say, look, that's great, that's awesome, not keen on that. So there were a few moments where we're just shaping things to give it that organic retro touch as well. And once you do that for the first two songs, everybody's in the vein. Swoley just does what Swoley does, which is just magic from heaven, and he was amazing as well. And it really was a team effort to produce that at the end of the day. But I think you're right. There's some moments I can't obviously understate the job that Linus Corneliusson did on the mix. It's absolutely sensational. It's a mix that you can hear everything crystal clear. And I think I did say to people, when you think or hear that James is doing an acoustic album, you're going to think, Kumbaya, my lord, sitting around the campfire. This is a sonic wall of sound, but with acoustic guitars. It's, even some of the press that I've done have said, yeah, but you've got electric guitars in Devil and Drag. And I went, there are no electric guitars in Devil and Drag whatsoever. That is entirely acoustic guitar. There's multiple 6 strings, there's a 12 string, there's an acoustic bass. But only the electric version has electric guitars in it. So what you're hearing is the power of the mix, the layering of those guitars, the keyboards, the kit behind it. It just all clicked together. And Linus just had that kind of Midas touch that he made a mix where you can hear everything as clearly as day, but you're not losing those percussive elements on the acoustic guitars. You're not losing the oomph on the cajon when you've got everything in the mix. Having an acoustic bass sounding so amazing now that you know that's, listen now tomorrow and say, wow, that's an acoustic bass. How did they do that? So it was a real team effort in producing what you've just said.
Yeah, and it shows the care in the songwriting and each of the players and sort of people behind the scenes in the engineering. It seems like they were able to understand the vision you guys had and share that. Because like I said at the beginning, the record has this, it coheres. It's and that's a classic record making sensibility, is that you want the record to feel like it has a sameness to it. Not in a negative way, but that the songs make sense as part of the experience of listening to the record. And this does that. But it does it in an even more unique way because you don't really plug in. And there are songs that have this wall of sound as you describe it. And then there's some very sparse moments where, the intimacy comes through with fewer instruments. All right, so let's dig into the record itself. Because I'm a visual guy, I have to talk about the cover. So when I started to stare at the cover, every next few moments, I felt like there was a new revelation inside it for me.
Yep.
Because I'm going to describe it for folks who haven't seen it, and then I'd like to hear some thoughts about how you guys arrived at it. But there's this fork in the, there it is. So there's this guy, you see his back, he's standing at a fork in the road. And to the left, it's dark and bleak and stormy. There's lightning. There's a big vulture on the ground. It looks like there's some pincher bones or some jaw bones. So very sort of death and menacing. There's if you look closely enough, and this might be me seeing things, but in these stone sort of mounts that climb up towards the sky, I believe I can see the hints of faces. That would be an artist doing some subtle intimation that I think is really, really intriguing. And then the guy himself, that left side of his wardrobe is all intact. And in fact, there's just a hint of him looking in that direction. You see his ear. Now on the right side, the path is in disrepair. There are huge potholes. The road itself is just fraught with the challenges of even walking it. But into this world on the right, there are clear skies. There are birds of flight. There's clear water. There's a great tree that's blooming. And so you have this dichotomy set up with these two halves. And the traveler himself, all of his clothes on the right side of his body are in tatters. And he's not wearing a shoe. Most of his pant leg is gone from the knee down. So there's this, and then the whole thing that's really interesting is if you then look at the logo at the top with James's name, the J and the L look like they're inverted, right? It's a J and an L, but they create this mirror image of each other. And then down below it, you see this scene unfold. So it's very deliberate. And so I wanted to ask, like, did you participate in signaling this or informing the artist, or did the artist sort of listen to the music and then sort of start the concept based on that to deliver this amazing image?
Yeah, so a couple of things in there. Yep, we both worked with Thomas Everhard. So James had done Impermanent Resonance, and I think maybe one other album. I can't quite remember which it was. Thomas has done every single Eden's Curse album, so we are really close, good friends. We've actually gone on site to location and shot for one of our records, so we've known each other for a long time. I've loved everything that I've worked with him. And similar to James, I would come with a script or some kind of concept and say, this is what I'm thinking. And Thomas would take it away, a few sketches, and then we would start to do it out. I think we started with the logo, and in actual fact, the J and the L was meant to signify Labrie Logue. Excuse me, I don't know what my camera is doing. It's coming in and zooming in and out. Are you seeing that?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a light or anything, but maybe I could turn on one second. I'll turn on a bigger light here. It might stop doing it.
Okay.
I've got one of these ring lights in the corner. Let me turn that off in case it's any better. I don't know if it'll calm down, but we'll see. Yes, I'll start again. You can make a cut.
Yeah.
So we started with the logo before we even touched the artwork, because I'd actually said to James, from a marketing standpoint, this was something I was huge with Eden's Curse, about having a brand. There's never really been a James Labrie logo. It's mostly been a kind of font more than anything. And I said it would be cool to have some merch with shirts and hats, etc., like that. So he was really into the idea, and the kind of inverted J was actually to signify Labrie and Logue. So it's L and L but inverted. So yeah, so we were in the process of talking to Sony about the project being like that. I never wanted my name on it. I'll be really honest here. My argument to James was, I'm not Steve Vai. It's not Vai and Labrie. I'm an unknown guy. I get from a marketing perspective totally why we should have it under your name. And Sony were James, you are the guy, so let's do it that way. But he was cool about doing that. And the way that we did the second L looked like his surname, James LaBrie. So it wasn't really related to the cover yet because we hadn't seen the cover, so it just is a coincidence. But James's lyrics were dealing with the two sides of life, you know, all of the beauty that we have in life, which is that gorgeous blue sky, the green fields in the background, the lovely trees, etc. But sometimes the path in life isn't always easy. You know, the journey can be like this to get there, whereas sometimes the easier way is to take that darker side of life. So the lyrics that he's got throughout Beautiful Shade of Grey are touching on, you know, some beautiful moments, Sunset Ruin about his brother passing away. You've got some darker elements like Devil and Drag, Give and Take, etc. And Wildflower being on the kind of lighter side until the last minute it flips on its head. So that's really what he said to Thomas was, look, here's the album, go listen to it. Here's my lyrics. He always gives the artist the lyrics and asks him to come out with his own interpretation. And he gave like a paragraph description of that. Dichotomy was the exact word he used, Peter. So I smiled when you said that. And that really was Thomas's almost first attempt. It came back with the road, and you know, we added some further elements to it. I think there were some things we took out of it as well. Less is more. I think we added a vulture in there. I haven't spotted the eyes, but I've just seen them now that you're talking in the rocks. But yeah, I think we did actually add. The guy was originally fully suited, and we said it would be killer if one half of him was broken like the road in front. And so it was just then fine tuning it to the point of being really pleased with it. And some of the other artwork, this is one of James's favourites, which was the cover for Am I Right, which is a guy with the rain coming out down under the umbrella, which I thought was a very typical Scottish summer, in my opinion. That's what it looks like in Scotland most of the time. But that's really cool as well, and maybe we'll do something with these images when it comes to merch at some point. We've no idea what we're doing yet, but yeah, everything again very deliberately thought out, but mostly driven by what he's written from a lyrical standpoint.
Yeah, well, it's a great image, and I'm glad you mentioned the image for Am I Right, because it's in my notes. When I was listening to the record, one of the places I listened to was on YouTube. And whoever has put those up used that image. So as I was listening to it, I was looking at it, and it's interesting. I'm going to hold that though when we get to that track, because now I want to dive into the tracks just a little bit. So and some of this ground we've covered, but Devil and Drag was the first place where I started it, and I started falling in love with the sound, the sort of sonic signature of the record, with the acoustic guitars, because they were not only providing this sort of chordal progression and framework, they were giving it this push because of the percussive nature of it. And that's not always true. I mean, part of it's the way you play it. So kudos to you for finding a way to have the instrument have a sort of a multiplicity of effect inside the song. And then with what Chris did with some of his sound choices, were just, I mean, they help sort of dial in the sound of something that is old but being made new again. You know what I mean?
Yep.
In Dracula, I think that the metaphor is old earth newly turned.
Yeah, that's cool. It's not done Derek Sherinian any harm, has it? He's been an advocate of some of those types of sounds for many years.
It's beautiful. It's really beautiful when you start. After you get through the initial listen, it's fun to go back and re-listen to the tracks and start to pay attention to the art inside the songs that the different players have layered in, because it's really rich. I mean, it really is. It's in fact, in some ways, it makes me wonder if the way you've decided to approach the songwriting here gives more space for the availability of these different sounds to be heard. You know, sometimes in a great big huge record with lots of blazing guitars, things fight so much for presence. Yeah. But here it just felt. This is why I think the experience of the concert could be so unique.
Yeah.
You know, I'm really hoping that comes to pass, because I can see it in my head, and I want you guys to play every tune on this record.
And I'm not sure if you're the same as me, Peter, sorry for cutting you off,
no,
but
go ahead.
I think those songs, for me, the way that they're written and that organic approach, I can picture these on a stage already. I can, maybe the only thing that we've talked about between us is we would have to have a second guitar player. Yeah, I would probably naturally play bass. That's my main instrument. So this was the first album I've ever recorded guitars on. So apart from maybe one song, but that's my natural instrument, and I sing a lot of backups as well. So I would be doing that live. So we would probably have to have another guitar player because there are multiple parts within that. All of the songs have got multiple parts that we would need to recreate live. But I hear that organic style. I can hear Christian going to the Hammond patch, then going to the strings. I could see Chance on a broken down smaller kit, some percussion. I think it would be absolutely incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, you could the presentation too. It could be created in this sort of informal. You could create an intimacy in a concert like that. That would be.
Well, that's funny you say that, because the offers that we've got in Germany are for kind of 500 to 1,000 cap venues, but they're all like converted churches or monasteries. And James is like, now we're talking. This is my kind of thing, and that now makes it a really exclusive event as well. So if we're going to try and investigate, can we get a tour of venues like that? And the way that I'm thinking, and I haven't even discussed this with Sony, so if Thomas Faber's watching this would be perfect to record this in such a DVD as we've done a few. Yeah.
Well, when Dream Theater did their Astonishing tour, they did all venues like that. They did all sort of those mid-sized theaters that had more of a theater sensibility and atmosphere in order to sort of be married to the fact that of the experience that they wanted to communicate. And I think this would do well in that same kind of thing.
Totally.
So Supernova Girl, the notes I made here was this was even more lush than the opening track for me. And the thing I noted for Chance, if he ever sees this, is I said tasty. Like the choices he made with the drums, and maybe I don't know how much of this you wrote and how much of it that he sort of was able to modify, but it just always felt like it was really tastefully integrated into the rhythms that were already present inside. You know what I mean? So it wasn't overbearing or drawing attention to itself. It was complementing the music.
Yeah, totally. I think when Chance joined, probably all of the songs were written. They were not quite 100% in their final arrangements, but they were there or thereabouts. His involvement, we'd maybe had a couple of extra choruses on the end for playouts that he said, let's trim the fat, let's get to the point. He was really good at doing that. But I think a couple of occasions he might have tweaked tempos or something, not too much, but let's try this here. Could you change the bass if I do this run? Just so musical in his output, to the point. I've worked with some drummers that come in and say, yeah, that sucks, let's do this, and have a completely negative approach to the kind of collaboration process, whereas Chance was very musical in everything that he suggested, and actually sometimes would program things like, I'm thinking I'm hearing this here, if you could do that with the bass, I can then do this, which is so great to be able to show someone that you're working with. Literally, if you're in the same room, you would turn around and play it. That was the internet was our room, essentially. So, but that's something that I've gotten used to from the Eden's Curse world, of course, that respect and not telling someone who's worked really hard on something that something sucks. It's the most, sucking out of joy phrase that can actually be that, and you're not getting paid.
Yeah.
But, let's do it another way and translate. If you've got an idea and you can convey that idea, great. Some people can't, but Chance was fantastic at doing that. So in actual fact, he was getting the chance to pardon the pun, to lay down drums to everything that was fully recorded and then really lock into what I'd done. But he was great at feeding back to me where I should maybe recut. And I think I actually recut all of the bass. The bass is much easier to run through in a couple of hours, record all 9 tracks once he's laid his kit, because you can then hammer on certain K-horn hits, certain drum beats, etc., accent some things that weren't there before, that really brought the songs, or gave them that more element of a tightness to them as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you can hear that. You can hear that attention to that detail. Um, and I loved that the drums were through what you did and whatever additional work Chance did to layer on to that. It was just a compliment to it.
Mm.
You know, that my experience with drummers has not always been good.
Yeah.
I find them the most challenging personalities to work with, and sometimes it comes through a little bit too much. Now that's this I have the bias here, so when I hear something that's where the drums seem so correctly attenuated to tune,
Yeah.
then I want to be sure that I mention it. Give and Take is in 6, at least most of it, right?
Yeah.
So it's got this wonderful lilting quality to it, and one of the more majestic choruses for me on the record. I wanted to ask
Mm-hmm.
you that some of the like in the coda in particular, but I think also in the solo, I thought I was hearing a little bit of a Spanish flair in some of the. I don't know if it was the progressions or something. Is that just me hearing that?
No, yeah, maybe not kind of Spanish, but if I just kind of play you that section, if I've got the right bit, would be Under the Solo. It was a kind of rhythm like that. That's the second part. The first part.
Yeah.
And it was really to build just take it somewhere different. So to say, okay, we're here throughout the song. Let's take it somewhere different. Let's give it a sense of urgency. Let's bring that whole solo section up. And you know, I work with an incredible guitar player in Eden's Curse, Thorsten Coney, who's just amazing. I would write solo sections for Thorsten all the time like that weren't just a copy of the chorus, you know. Boring. Give him something different. Let's have Christian bring in some orchestration. So he would I think he mirrored me with strings. In fact, I think in the mix you hear more of the strings than the acoustic there, but it works so well with the bass and everything else. And then you're giving Marco Sfoli such a template to say, go and do your thing. And really, there's more flamenco in the lead than anything.
Yeah.
And those fast runs are just absolutely incredible.
Maybe that's what I was hearing. But that it's you said something that I did want to mention about the record, which is that when you are creating these progressions, they are surprising. They're and I think that this is part of what's fresh about the record for me is that some of the where you would expect some of the chord changes to go, they violates my expectation. The way I like to talk about it, and that's good because it means that it's going into a new place. And it sounds like that's an intentional thought in your compositional process. Is like, you know, let's go to a new place here, and you doing that creates opportunities for the other players to do things.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I'll try. I think I said off camera when we were doing some prep that I like to try, certainly as a songwriter, even though I wasn't writing a lot or any of the lyrics and melodies apart from Wildflower, which was my completed song that I gave to James. I wasn't writing any of the melodies here, but I write as a songwriter who thinks that there's lyrics and melodies going on top of this. So if I'm not hearing, you know, for me, structure, if I'm not hearing, you know, defined sections within songs like an obvious verse, etc., if I'm not hearing, you know, a bridge or a pre-chorus, depending on what you call it, then how to expect the person that I'm going to give this to create their magic to think the same thing? I try and make it obvious. And there may be elements that I feel naturally a melody could beautifully flow into without it being like an added on. You know, you sometimes get those songs that it changes into a bridge that you think, oh, that's what the hell happened there? I never want to get to that point as a writer. And luckily, you know, what I've given James has worked and always worked with his melodies as well. So that's what I try and put my head in as a I come from as a kind of singer-songwriter, even though I'm not a singer-songwriter. That's the angle that I'm coming from.
Yeah.
I know that we always have a laugh as musicians. I'm sure you've done it as a writer. We always have a laugh at reviews sometimes, and I did read somebody saying, am I right? They were saying, yeah, this song doesn't really go anywhere. There's no obvious verse, bridge, or chorus. And I'm thinking, what? God's name.
What are they? I don't know. What are they listening to?
Apart from the fact that they're all different keys and different tempos. And my other favorite review was somebody that said, in fact, I'll wait until the song comes round because that would be better. That would be better. It's not far off.
Yeah, we're coming. The next one I wanted to mention is so Sunset Rain. For me, it's kind of the note I made as I was listening to it is it was a beautiful dirge, because it's lyrically there's something a little bit darker about it, but it's so beautifully written that it feels like the kind of thing that you would want to mourn to. It sounds morbid, but like music has a place there, a needful place there. And this song, and it becomes, the dimensions on it expand. I believe I heard in the strings, one of the lines was this cello line. Just at the lower end, but not just to sort of hold down the lower end. It had a melodic structure of its own. And it created some resonances inside the tune. And that was one where once I listened to it, even though I was listening front to back, I ran it back immediately and listened to it again.
Cool. That's always a good sign.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that's some sort of strange signal about where I am emotionally in my life or something.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful song. But there's a languor to it, which I think is really great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if you know the story, but that's written about the passing of James's brother, Bruce, who died of cancer. Sense. Yeah, so yeah, you'll get that. You've heard that in there, and what an honor to when I wrote that song, I came up with the chord progression for it, which runs the whole way through the song. Gave it to James, and he immediately came back with, "Look, I've got an idea for a lyric. I want to throw this past you." And then he told me what it was about after I read the lyrics and kind of heard the melody. So it was an honor for him to do that. But yeah, all of those, I think I mentioned earlier, that was the song when we were writing it, that we thought, this is so beautiful. I could hear the cello. In fact, I programmed, I've got a little keyboard beside me here, which I've got an orchestral plug-in. That you can pull out all sorts of things. I've written intros for Eden's Curse that way. And I came up with a kind of cello part at the start. So there's a violin and a cello, which those are played live on the album. It's a couple of students from the Birmingham, I think it's the orchestra from the Academy actually. And they've done that live throughout the whole song. But we used a mixture of Christian and a really talented arranger from Brazil who was a friend of Dennis's. His name's Bruno Oliveira, and Bruno's got that almost like the kind of Hans Zimmer approach. He just brings in these darker chords that we just gave it a different character to what Christian was doing as well. So the combination of the whole team there. I wrote the kind of, I think after the chorus, before the second verse, there's this haunting kind of melody. La, da, 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 da. Like that was on my original demo on a violin, and we were thinking, should that be played on guitar? And I thought actually a lone violin would do that great. So yeah, that was a kind of embryonic moment for us to say, yeah, now that we've Christian, let's get somebody to do the solo. And we say, well, hell, we might as well get a drummer as well. And then Chance came into the mix, and Chance brought these percussive elements where I was definitely thinking 80s, halftime drum beat, rim shot, Kip Winger style. He's like, no chance. I'm going to drag you dinosaurs into the new era. He sent me a couple of YouTube clips from some modern bands doing all the Cajon and stuff, and I'm saying, okay,
yeah, it was brilliant.
Go do your thing.
It was a brilliant addition there, what he did. And I'm such a visual person. As you're talking, if you get this on stage, like, here's just something that put in the back of your head is you could take the group on tour with like the principal musicians, but you
Yeah.
could do like what TSO does, and you could in each city that you play, you could bring in instrumentalists, just like a cello player and a violin player. It might be and you can, and the day rate on those is really really reasonable. You give them the sheet music, they can just play it. But putting those people kind of maybe more back towards the back of the stage, but part of that ensemble when you play those would just give it this, oh man, the experience of that and getting to see the ensemble, the music come to life with the players could be really, and that can be done pretty reasonably. So if Sony's or whoever's footing the bill, it's like that's doable.
That'll be the DVD.
Well, that's the thing is if you're going to do a DVD, man, definitely when you're going to shoot that, I think it would just add another dimension. And what it would do is it would visually signal to the listener elements that they might be hearing but not really acknowledging. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Good point. Yep. Definitely.
Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let's keep going. So Hit Me Like a Brick. Tell me what this song's about.
That was about I think just falling in love with someone. If I remember correctly, all the lyrics are James, so do forgive my sketchiness on what the angle was, but I believe it was a guy who was fond of someone and he's trying to hold on to them, and then realizing, oh, this is the moment, and it smacks him in the face. He's totally in love and head over heels will do anything for them. So yeah, for me, it was just a song that I wanted to kind of have a kind of rocker. Devil and Drag was a rocker, another one like that. And in fact, the last riff came at almost the last minute because it originally started. Which just wasn't doing it for me right up to the last minute. And I said to James, do you know something? I'm really not digging that main riff on the song, and came up with and I've got a second guitar part behind it.
Yeah.
Over behind that. So that's where the two guitars come. And Chance and James were like, holy shit, you've just thought of that now. And from a rocking perspective, I think it's one of the best songs on the album. It could have possibly been a single. Great hook in the chorus. This was the song that I was going to refer to a hilarious review that said that this was just like Devil and Drag Part 2 and therefore a bit lazy in the reviewer's opinion. And I said, apart from the fact they're in a different key, a different time signature and a different tempo, he's got a bit of a point.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Don't get me started on modern reviewers.
Yeah.
So their mostly value is for humorous effect. So let's keep going through because I want to get to all the songs. So Wildflower, it's a place where I noted that I really, really liked the chord progressions in this one, particularly in the breakdown. They were just I couldn't anticipate them, but as soon as I heard them, it's like, oh yes, God, he went there. And James does this thing in here where he does these ahs in the background.
Yeah,
and it's just vowels, but it's so beautiful. It made me think of what you said earlier, where he was giving you melodic ideas, where he was just singing sort of babble. But here, like it's I don't know. It's tell me about this particular section.
Yeah, so that whole song, I wrote that song in its entirety. I demoed it, gave James the lyrics, vocal melodies, the lot, and he's saying, "This is perfect. We don't need to change this. Let's go for it." So I had the section at the end really changes. So for me, I guess you'll like this. It's a kind of piece of fiction where it's this girl who's airy fairy. She's not a care in the world, but there's something about her that's kind of what's going on in this girl's life. We talk about she carries a letter in her pocket, a picture of her father in a locket, and you're thinking, okay, where is this going? But she's got not a care in the world, and it's just alluding to that she's that way because something dark and sinister has happened. So I love watching kind of crime kind of whodunits. I like reading crime novels as well. I like reading those types of where they've got a plot twist. And that whole section for me was to really, I was trying to find some way to end this, or in fact, I think I was trying to find a solo section. And I thought, when I found that chord change, I thought, right, I'm not going for a traditional solo. I'm going for an actual kind of outro. I don't even know what you would call it, but the whole song's going to play out here in a darker, sinister tone. And I really, when I recorded the demo, I close mic'd myself, which is right, you'll know this, right up in front of the mic. And I could imagine James, I was picturing him doing some of the darker characters on The Astonishing and going word by word, but with a little bit of angst there. And behind it, my voice will not be able to pull this off, but the kind of falsetto in the background really being a haunting, almost like a scream kind of moment. So it was great. Christian really brought that song to life, I think, as well with the orchestration. He's got some of these orchestral, they're like stabs in there that they go zoom, that really emphasize certain elements of it and playing along with the tempo and the rhythm. It's just one of those tracks that when you demo it, you're excited about it. When you heard it back, you're like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. Yeah. And the mix from Linus really gives it a kind of cinematic element towards the end. So yeah, it's a song. It's a song that a lot of people have been talking about. Fully written, Supernova Girl and Wildflower are all written in open tuning in E. So I don't have a guitar in that setting. So you play it without a hand on it, and it's an open E chord. And Zeppelin do it a lot. Lots of bands have used it throughout the year, so it gives you different voicings that you just couldn't do in a standard kind of setup. So that constituted to the big sound. For Supernova Girl and Wildflower, I used my gorgeous 12-string here, so a lot of the layering is on the 12-string, just playing exactly what the 6 is playing, but it layered it up and just gives it a choral kind of effect to it and makes it huge. And I think when I was mixing this with Linus, I was saying to him, the 12 sound amazing on this. Why don't we push them to the front and bring the 6s to the back? Whereas I think it's the other way around on Supernova Girl. So that's just a little bit of insight on how we did that.
Yeah, I could hear. I think I heard that on a couple of tunes. Did you not also use that on? It's actually What I Missed, the beginning. Did you have the 12-string at the intro of that?
Yes. In fact, it's probably on every song in some aspect or another. Even the main riff of Devil and Drag's got a 12 under it to really kind of layer that out and fatten it up. You stick a couple of acoustic guitars on top of each other, it doesn't build as greatly as a kind of electric would. So just even using 2 different types of guitars, a Defender, a Sigma here, and the 12-string. Some of the tracks I was giving to Linus would be 36 tracks because each one was double tracked. Every part was double tracked. Not only was I double tracking it, I was miking it and direct input into the mixing desk. So he was getting the opportunity to use the mic or the DI and do any reamping or use plugins. So I have no idea what he did to get the sound, but I was really delighted with it naturally.
Well, I want to go back to Conscience Calling, but that opening to What I Missed, where there's a guitar that comes in after one sort of repeat, and the first thing I thought it was a harpsichord or some sort of but as I listened to it, it says no, that's just like a 12-string or something that's got this.
Yeah, it's a 12. Yeah,
but it gave me chills, like the way it built and the how the sound evolved with the layering of those guitars. It's just a moment where your effort to do that, to thicken it up and kind of evolve the sound, had a real measurable impact on me anyway as I listened to it.
Oh, amazing, cool.
Yeah,
and there's a couple of really cool tricks in there as well because I think my 12 might be out of tune. Let's just see how bad this is because this doesn't get played as much. It's not too bad. You can hear that, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
But what I did, one trick that I did with the end of each of those sections was actually let the chord ring out naturally, like, and I let it ring out for as long as it did, and then I actually reversed it as well. So leading into certain sections, I've reversed that chord so it would go, but it backwards, we would turn it backwards, and it would lead right into emphasize a section. So Linus got just an unbelievable number of tracks from me with all of these acoustic guitars, and I said, look, you do what you want with these, delete what you don't need, but I've given you everything that's got a place for each part. Just find what sounds sonically good for you and work with it from there.
Yeah. Well, he did a great job, and you certainly gave him a lot of tools to work with. And the way he was able to do that and bring this is just one example of it, but it was one I wanted to note so that folks who go listen to the record, I think it's a very marked moment where that's used to great effect.
And actually, one thing just on that song as well, I wrote the piano piece originally on guitar, and I thought this would be a nice break in the record if we just ditch the guitars here and let Christian play that whole intro on piano, and then bring the guitars in at the section that you really liked. And I'm glad, because the transition from the voice to the piano is beautiful. It's got, again, that kind of what I call the survivor, the reverse E chord leads into the piano riff from the end to tail end of James's vocals. And just, I remember playing a friend of mine who's a Dream Theater fanatic. He was like, what's happening with this album? Can't wait to hear it. And we were driving somewhere, and he said, have you got any of the record? I said, I've had the record for 6 months. He's like, you bastard, play me something. So I played Conscience Calling into What I Missed, and he just turned to me and he said, this is unbelievable. He says, the hairs on my arm are all standing to attention.
Yeah.
And I think we only got as far as the first chorus until we arrived wherever we were driving to, but he was just, amazed when he heard it.
Yeah, those vocal harmonies, it's impressive, and it has that effect, that chilling effect. It reminded me a little bit of some work James did with Trent Gardner back in the Explorers Club days,
right?
Which is a high compliment, because Trent was kind of a composer ahead of his time and taken too soon. But I wanted to go. I'm glad you brought us back to that, because I didn't want to miss it. It's such great, almost kind of like intro to. It felt almost like an intro to the next song, at least the way that it kind of segued.
And that's what it was. In fact, it was one song, and he went actually to Henning Pauly, who was the kind of mastermind of the Frameshift album James did a few years back, and James had talked about this a cappella piece that he did with Henning, and he said Henning is an unbelievable vocal arranger. So James had written the melody, and we played around with it, and he thought this needs Henning, because Henning's got that ability to know all of the notes that you're going to go to, and you have that baritone, you've got the bass there, you've got all of the midsection, and you can hear some of the notes staying the same, some changing around. It's just a gorgeous piece of work. And he came back, and then James and Chance took all of the guides and recorded it in the studio, which I think he said was 76 vocal lines. Unbelievable when you hear that all together, and it's haunting. But when we had it together, I said, look, in order for Henning, who's the songwriter as well of that piece, he got a credit for it. I said that deserves its own kind of track, and it would be a nice segue into What I Missed, because it was essentially the intro to that song. So that's the way that transpired, and then you're having to get the label to make sure they put the split on the mastering. And I haven't heard the vinyl yet, but I said, please make sure that song flows into each other. That's the only thing I'm asking.
Well, I think they did, because that's the experience I had. I had to go back and be sure that it wasn't still that when it transitioned into What I Missed. 76 tracks. If my memory serves, Bohemian Rhapsody had 73 vocal tracks.
Wow. Okay.
So James put in the overtime to make that lush.
There we go. There we go.
Okay, let's talk about Am I Right? So this is the song that I mean, when the album came out, I shot James a note and said, "Congratulations, you know, happy for you, my friend, new record." And I didn't have an advance copy, so I wasn't able to listen to the whole thing. So when Am I Right was released kind of as a single, and at least when the video came out and I listened to it, I wrote him another email and I said, "This song gave me chills. Like this." This is a track that I think could like put legs on this record, if it isn't already, in terms of bringing audiences to it. It has that it quality that you never know until you write it. I mean, the whole record is strong, but for me, there's a secret sauce in here. So I want to talk more about this. One, the image it's interesting that this has its own unique paired image, which, you know, of the guy standing under the umbrella, it being the only one getting rained on. But the lyrics kind of are this interesting journey to the music that you've written. The chorus is, I've said this kind of before in other of the songs that you wrote here, but the progressions are surprising to me. And so, you know, and of course, once you listen to it many times, then you know where they're going. But that moment of surprise and delight when you're experiencing a song that is going in a direction you don't know and also pleasing you, you know, because sometimes a song will do crazy things you can't anticipate, but they don't somehow edify. This song does both. And the way that you wrote it and the orchestration is just, I've said fresh. Fresh sounds like a produce commercial, so I hate using it, but it's just unique. It's you could say it's a throwback. You know, like you had these corollaries from early rock, but it's really its own thing. I think what you've created here has hallmarks of Zeppelin and bands that you knew and loved, but it's its own thing. It has its own character. And of course, I know that Dream Theater fans will love that Teresa Thomason is got a bit here, and it's a meaningful bit, but it's not like it's a dual lead type thing. So it comes in for some great effect towards the end of the song, and I think it was a good choice. But this is really like you, and to me, this is you and James at a crescendo on this record. So I wanted to ask you and this is the thing I said to James in my email. It kind of goes lyrically in a way that's a little bit different later, that almost has a little bit of an echo of the times in which we live, the sort of social fabric that is we're living through right now. But it was really interesting that I told him, I said, and I didn't know that, because for me, some of the conversation in the lyrics early on were kind of hitting me in the feels, because I thought at first it was a relationship type of story. And as each next sort of lyric, at least for the first half of the track, was progressing, I was having this very personal, intense reaction to it. And when my arm started to chill up, was when these sentiments were sort of underscored by this music and the changes that you get to in the chorus. Did you tell me earlier someone thought that the chorus just was that a different song? Was just not it wasn't going anywhere?
Yeah, the whole song was not going anywhere.
Yep.
No obvious bridge, no obvious verse, no obvious bridge, and no obvious chorus.
Well,
I thought, are you kidding me?
My two comments to that are, one, I don't think that guy knows what a bridge and chorus are, and number two, if that's the only way you can decide to criticize something, is that the song is doing something so unique that you can't put it in a box, then why? That seems like the worst kind of non-critique there is. So anyway, let's put him aside for a minute. Tell me any context to this particular song that maybe we haven't heard.
Yeah, I mean, writing it for me, I think throughout my career as a musician, special songs arrive when you least expect it, and this is definitely one of them. It's not often that I run across the house with my acoustic guitar and say to my wife, listen to this. That was the feeling that I was getting as just a general musician sitting with an acoustic guitar on my lap creating this, and then being excited to record it in a demo form and share it to James. So, you know, I've never lost that. That's what keeps me doing what I'm doing throughout my years. You know, even as we were talking about some of the songs and adding, like the Christian adding his Hammond organs to Devil and Drag, each stage of this process has that feeling inside me that makes me realize why I continue to do this. It's like when you come up with the ending of a chapter or a new character or something, it just drives and burns inside you that goes, oh my God, and can be the catalyst for producing the rest of the song. And, you know, coming up with the main lick on the acoustic, which is all finger picked, it's really one of the hardest songs that I've ever had to record because it's so sensitive in nature, that the wrong finger been caught in a string, the wrong nail plicking, the finger just been slightly out of position. You can hear it like a pin drop in the recording. So by the time I'd finished recording all of these tracks, my fingers were red raw, but it had to be perfect. But as I came through each section, it was then saying, okay, that was gorgeous. Where can I hear this go? And I think it probably took me maybe the best part of a week to really not only write it, but actually be able to play it, because it is quite intricate. To the point I'm thinking if we ever did this live, I might want to play this because I so enjoy playing it. It's such a beautiful instrument. And then the bass player in me panics and says, I'll leave it to a professional guitar player. For me, it's one of those songs. I've openly said in some of the press that this is one of the best songs I've ever written in my life. Even if there was no lyrics on it, I'd be absolutely delighted with it. I loved all of the structures I put together. I worked really hard on each section, Mr. Reviewer. And, you know, I think the bridge is gorgeous. I love the chorus, which is really, for me, kind of unique to anything I've ever written. And then I use actually my thumb to go down.
Yeah.
So it's really different to anything I've ever written. I'm usually a 4-chord chorus man. Hey, let's get the hook in there. But when I sent this to James, and he came back, I alluded to it earlier with the melody of just over the top of that. And I'm walking around the house singing that chorus for absolute months and waiting for what James's lyrics are going to be. And I remember one day just singing it and making a sandwich, and I thought, oh my God, it just dawned on me that this was the same type of song like Take Away My Pain. It was that vibe from that Falling into Infinity record. And I actually emailed James and said, look, this is what I'm getting from that melody of yours. You know, I don't know if that means anything to you or helps you, but you know, it was interesting to watch the reaction from the people when we put this song out, because yeah, it's a little bit different in many places. I think the start of it can almost sound like it's a country song. And I was listening to, was a brand new single out by Leprous just around the time we were recording, and it's filmed in this beautiful studio in Norway somewhere. Gorgeous video. Guys are just playing live, and the guitar player just does this thing with a reverb, and he doesn't even play a chord. He just uses the volume pedal. And I went, what the hell is that? That is just incredible. And I emailed Marco, said, Marco, what's he doing here? I think it was a reverb pedal or something, if I remember correctly. I said, that's the shit we need in the start of Am I Right? And you see him do that on the video. And that's almost got that kind of pedal steel kind of country element to it as well.
Yeah.
But then adding the layers as we went through, the chance with that beautiful cajon, even if you see him in the video hitting it, it just sounds like he's genuinely hitting it in the video. It's beautiful. What a powerful sound. And him and Linus worked really hard on the EQ and everything to have that really jump out of the speakers at you as well. So as the song builds, there's more instrumentation gets added in each section. So it might be just me with the Fender by the time we move into the the kind of bridge section. I might be adding in the second guitar, and I don't think the 12s come in until Teresa comes in. It's a completely different rhythm. I think it's even a capo that plays there. But the song, James and I kept talking about what we would call the foreigner ending. We kept saying, let's go for that. I want to know what love is. Could we have a choir in there? So the choirs, there's a male choir sung by Dennis Ward, my buddy. He did all of the choirs himself. Wow. So he's doing a that kind of thing, and it's building and it's going up and it's going down. Teresa's over the top of that with a couple of her friends helping her. They're doing some yes and some of her vocal raves, and James doing his thing. So when we heard that all out completed, it was just incredible. I'm not going to take a stab at the lyrics because I originally thought that I think James's idea was based around. I think there was two songs that he wrote. One was, I think, Give and Take was one about the media manipulation, and I think this one was leaning towards, kind of rights and liberties for everyone, and that's where certainly some of the choral elements come out. But I totally get what you meant from, the start of the lyrics in the first verse. It's very relationship sounding in that regards, but I think at the time all of the kind of Harvey Weinstein stuff was going around when we were writing this, and I think maybe there was some elements of inspiration from that, taking people's rights, it should be the same rights for everyone. I think that was where he was kind of headed, but I'll let the lyricist answer that one. But I love it. I love it, and as I said, I think it's one of those. I'm glad that you've said that. It was one of those songs when we started seeing it, and we've been keeping a close eye on the video hits, and this one is, given the fact that Devil and Drag was out maybe 2 or 3 months behind it, this is almost up right behind it in terms of numbers. So we're thinking, as you said, this could have the legs, it could overtake it and keep running for us. But amazing song. It's definitely my favourite on the record, without a doubt.
Yeah, it's kind of top to bottom. In terms of how you've just described how the instrumentation evolves, things you keep layering on, the song builds. And I guess what's forever great about lyrics is they're personal. You bring your own sort of history to them. But objectively, I guess you could make the argument that even if it begins more personal, that, good arguments often begin to in the specific, and then they argue to the general. And so if these relational ideas are in there, taking those to larger concerns that have more societal implications would be a meaningful way to evolve the lyrics. But regardless of any of that, it does have that ineffable quality that some songs have. And so I think the likelihood is it's getting shared organically. People are like, wow, and they're sharing. And I think that will continue. And hopefully I was in marketing when I was at Microsoft, and, one of the simple but cardinal rules is when you see something starting to get a reaction, you pour gas on it. So hopefully the people who are at the record label are seeing some of this, and they're pouring some gas on this song. If they're not, they should hire me to do it. But yes, it's a great tune. It's and I know I don't want to kind of belabor the point, but it's if anybody's listening to this or sees this video later and you're wondering about the record, the whole record's great. But if you want the gateway song that should convince you that this is something unique, just go dial this particular tune up. And I think you'll become an instant fan, because it does typify a lot of what the record sounds like and is communicating. But it's the standout, for me anyway.
Thank you, amazing. And it's been really funny because I've got in front of me here a schedule of release dates from Sony and what times are all going out. So I would see this 5 hours before James and Chance would wake up. So I'm seeing Europe flip out and be working away, and I'll check just Facebook just for 5 minutes while I'm working, and the first comment come up under it, Take Away My Pain. And I thought, he's got it.
Yeah, yeah.
But again, without the, there was no rip off at all there. It just reminded
No.
me of it at all. It's just in that vibe. That's essentially where we're going. In fact, I think, some of the songs could translate to that album. You could quite easily hear them on Take Away My Pain, and Falling into Infinity.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely places where there are echoes, but that's just that has nothing to do with ripoff. That's just, you've heard James sing 15 studio albums and however many live records, and invariably, whether it's a key or a way he delivers a lyric, there's going to be some semblance of it. But this is all this is unique to you guys, and it's even unique in just the sort of landscape of music that's being written right now. So that's me commending it to anybody who is watching now or who hears this once I load the video. My bias, of course, is that I love James's voice. I have this theory, or at least this feeling about fandom. When I'm a fan of a band or fan of a musician, I kind of go with the musician on their journey. I see fans who become very enamored of certain phases of a band or of a musician, and that's who they are, and that's all they really want from them. So when they do something different, they're like, well, that doesn't sound like, Images and Words. That doesn't sound like Awake. I don't want that. I'm not that way. Like my best example of that is Queensryche. I know you're a fan of Queensryche.
Yeah, huge. Yeah.
There's a lot of people who said after they did Empire, and then fans get into different camps about early stuff and late stuff. I kept buying their records, and I wouldn't put them all on the same amount of repeat, but I always found things to commend the records, because I love to hear Jeff sing. I love to hear Jeff, the way he interprets a song. And because I'm a fan of him as a musician. And so I don't get bothered. I'm excited when I get to hear a musician or a voice like James's go do something that I haven't heard him do before, like for real.
Yeah.
And I was so excited. I've loved all his solo records, but and he did talk about this in advance. He did a good job of letting folks know, I'm going in a sort of, it jams. It's a great jam, but it's going in a different way. It's not, this isn't me doing a side Dream Theater project that sounds really Dream Theater-y. And I'm glad he didn't. Like, kudos to you guys for having like a vision and sticking to it. Anyway, I'm kind of repeating myself there. Now, just real quick to finish off, there is a cover of Ramble On, which is great. You guys, sounds like this makes sense because you were thinking some of the early Zepp as inspiration.
Yeah, totally. I think I remember James came with the initial idea of That's the Way, which was one of his favorite songs growing up. And it was a song I knew, but it never really was a Zepp song that totally moved me, if I'm being honest. And I remember either watching an interview with you or somebody else that he was talking about Zepp being one of his favorite bands, and he mentioned Ramble On being one of his favorites. I thought, wow, that's such a great song. It's acoustic based anyway. I could hear us taking, no electric guitar where Jimmy does that. You could have the Hammond substitute in its place, and we were hearing throughout the recordings how powerful Christian was making the songs with that approach. So I said to him, look, idea for you. And as soon as I mentioned Ramble On, he says, do it. Get Chance recording this weekend. That was it, done. And it was great fun to do.
Yeah.
I kind of learned it that day and started laying down a guide for Chance to cut within a day or two. And it really came together. What Chance, I remember him calling me and saying, how did you do the tempo? I says, look, I just got the tempo. There's tempo beat detectors on the internet. There's one that you can manually type, so I got the tempo. It sounds like Zepp didn't really record to click back in those days. It's all over the place at bits. But what he said was there's a really, really great groove to the acoustic guitar even before I put the drums down. So it really worked for us, and everybody else added all of the sprinkles that they do on top of it. And James just knocked it out of the park as usual.
Yeah, it's a good kind of fun note to kind of finish the tune on. There's a version, I don't know if it's on the record or if this is just like a special. an electric version of Devlin Drag. I don't know if that's on the album or if that's a
It's on,
special
yeah.
track. Yeah,
That's on. That's on all releases. So that initially was meant to be like like a kind of joke of the traditional Japanese bonus tracks where you would do an acoustic version. We said, well, we've done an acoustic album, let's do an electric version.
That's awesome.
And that was one of my buddies that came up with that idea. And it turned out so good. I remember saying to Marco Sfoli, we were finishing the other tracks. Marco had done all of these solos. And I said, Marco, why don't you take this? I'll give you the bass and drums and the keys. You do all the electric guitars on it. And I think I recut an electric bass for this one. And he came back and it was just amazing. And James was like, holy shit, we should do the whole album like this. There is no chance. We're just about finished. No way. We've only been doing it for 2 years and we're going to go back and cut it all. So I said, that's a nice question mark that it leaves it hanging on, you know, what could the second record be if we are going to bring in some more electric elements? Maybe we don't because of the reaction. It would be, you know, stupid to kind of go for a full rock record when everyone said, I love the direction, but how much legs have we got in this? I don't know. This is what we're going to try and explore.
Well, I mean, you guys will make the right choice. It occurs to me that there are labels out there that are doing a lot of rock records, many of them by established rock musicians out of the 80s and 90s. And they're fine, and some are good. But there's kind of a certain degree of sameness about them. And while you guys, your songwriting is puts the fingerprint on it. You guys have gone one better. And so I'm really hoping that not that you can't and shouldn't write songs that are fully electric, but you might find a path here that is your own. Like this is the conversation I've been having with a lot of my musician friends is very often when you're the front end of a musical movement, the bands that seem to have longevity are those that are there first. They have the advantage of being a first mover. So with grunge, you remember Pearl Jam and a few of those groups, but there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of grunge bands. So anyway, you guys might be in this first mover opportunity where you're doing something in a time when everything you're kind of being released with is not that. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think you're right, Peter. I think it's nice to be different in a, as you alluded to yourself earlier on, in a time when there's so many albums and that if you're in this genre, the heavy rock. I mean, some of my favourite records in the last few years have been by the Neil Morse Band. I absolutely adore Neil's stuff. And by the way, I didn't get into Neil until after I started writing with James, which is funny because one of the first comments I read was, holy shit, this sounds like Neil Morse. And I thought that's a huge compliment.
Yeah.
And, maybe the next record might sound even more like Neil Morse. But I can see that people are reacting to it. And I'm a great believer in don't fix what ain't broke. I think that it would be folly for us to go and completely change the pattern. It works as well because James's voice works so great with acoustic, the instrumentation works so great with acoustic, but there are electric moments on here. There are some electric guitars by Marco and a couple of solos. There's some electric guitars inside of Ramble On. There's nothing to say that we couldn't riff it up here or there and slowly break it in, but who knows? Let the album walk for a few months. Let us try and get some shows under our belt if that's possible, even, and see where it leads. But it's been extremely humbling from my side of things to work with someone like James, who's again just like my friend. I've known my friend for 10 years. It's brought us a lot closer as well. And in fact, one of the hardest parts of this godforsaken pandemic was they've just swung by the UK. I went to see them, and James and I have just done an album and we couldn't meet. They were in a bubble. And I literally had to hand, I brought them a lovely bottle of scotch from Scotland, whiskey we call it. So I handed it over the fence to one of the security guards that went to the TM. And James called me from the room. What have you done, you silly boy? You've bought me this gorgeous bottle. So that was sad throughout the time. But yeah, we'll get our time in the sun. We want to sit as a a group and actually have a few beers together, and something that James and I have never had an opportunity to do because he tours, he stays off alcohol when he's touring. But that would be a nice moment for us somewhere down the line to get a chance to hang out as two friends, to celebrate what we've done, to celebrate our relationship and where it's come from 10 years ago, and doing a piece of session work. So it's been amazing, humbling to work with someone of his level, his professionalism. It lifted my game absolutely beyond belief. I've given what I think some of the best performances I've ever done. And to meet and work with, Chance and Marco for the first time has just been amazing. So I think Christian alluded to it in our electronic press kit, that there's a chemistry between the musicians that's hard to believe when this has been an international collaboration. Every single person has been so receptive to working. There's never been a toy thrown out of a pram when we ask for a recut or anything like that, which was rare, by the way. It was extremely rare. But maybe if something was overplayed or a sound wasn't working, these guys were all like, "Okay, let me try that," and they sent it back without any major drama involved in it. So it was a joy to make it. It was hard waiting. We had it in the can just as DT were releasing Top of the World, so we had to wait a long time for the cycle. That was a little bit frustrating, but Sony said, "Trust us, guys. We're going to sing from the heavens about this," and they sure did. So let's see where things go from here. But it's been an amazing journey so far.
Yeah, well, it's well earned, and I think it's telling that James, I mean, he could work with anybody, and him making the choice to work with you is telling. It's cool to hear that you lifted your game, but your fingerprint, so to speak, and I think I said this, is all over this record. You've so much to be proud of here, and I was so delightfully surprised. I knew that it wasn't going to be another progressive metal record because James had telegraphed that, but I wasn't really prepared for what the sound was, and I just think the timing's good, man. I really hope that the stars are aligning for this, and that you're already thinking into the future of things you can do, because I think we need this kind of music. Something that has a little bit of soul in it, maybe a little bit where we started with the soul of Scotland, that sort of deep pride in history is coming through your fingers and giving life to this music. But it's unique, and it's been a long time since I listened to an album and had this kind of this feeling that I was kind of privileged to get to hear something that was different. This doesn't happen very often, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's amazing. That's amazing. High praise indeed. Thank you. And one cool anecdote was we did have one leftover song that James felt was too much of a step in the other direction. It was a faster song. It was how could we describe it? It was probably a little funk in there, but we'd kind of a funky bass line, a funky hook, and one of the most rhythmic lyrics I've ever heard him produce. And I don't know, he just felt it was too much of a departure from what people would know. And I'm saying, but listen to Am I Right? It's like country in the start, and then it builds. We all loved it. It had vintage keyboards through it, but he decided, look, it got fully mixed and everything, but it was one that we've just stuck in the can. So who knows? He might feel brave after all the reviews, and it might see the light of day. But it was a huge. The lyrics, Peter, were like, "I started out with," like huge verses, but so rhythmic, different from anything he's ever done, with really cool kind of almost like a Boogie Nights on acoustic behind it.
Oh, wow.
And really cool Rhodes piano and a killer groove from Chance. So who knows? That might see the light of day. So maybe we keep that for number 2.
Yeah. Or if you guys end up on tour, you can pull out an original song from this group that people haven't heard before. It'd be a kind of a
there we go.
Fun surprise.
Road test it.
Well, man, I'm so glad that you gave me 2.5 hours of time for us to chat about this. I think people are in for a treat, those who haven't heard the record yet. And so my congratulations to you. This is really, really good work. And you know, I admit my bias in being predisposed to like anything James does, but I feel like I'm critical or objective enough to kind of look at the rest of the records that some of my heroes put out, and this is great. This is a great record. It'll be criminal if this doesn't get the attention it deserves. So, and it's one of the reasons I don't have a huge bully pulpit from which to evangelize for you. But what I can do, I'm intent to do. So, so thank you for coming on and spending some time with me today.
Thank you, Peter, for having me. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and yeah, I've been a fan of your show as well. I've watched a lot, having seen James on it, and some of my other musical idols as well. So keep doing what you're doing, man, and thanks for enjoying the music.
Yeah, for sure. Well, do me a favor, just stay on the Zoom for a second so I can say a personal goodbye. I'll play the outro, and then until next time, thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.